Today's a beautiful morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Carnival Breakfast Show coming to you from Carnival Radio. This is Newspaper Review. I am Joseph Oyukola. Good morning and welcome once again. This morning on Newspaper Review, I came with different newspapers and each of them with interesting stories. I have the Punch with me, I have the Vanguard newspaper, I have the Post, and I have the Nation newspaper. But to begin the news and details, here are the headlines. I read the first headline from the Punch newspaper. Mark slams federal government after a court reversed ADC deregistration. Habia begins relocation of transport operators to new terminal. State kick as Senate moves to amend Electricity Act. Labour to engage federal government on minimum wage review. Senate recalls members from recess over rising insecurity. And now to the news and details. I read the first story from the Punch, a newspaper where Mark slams federal government after a court reverses ADC deregistration. Following the Court of Appeal's decision to reverse the deregistration of the African Democratic Congress and four other parties on Monday, ADC National Chairman Senator David Mark stated that the judiciary is on trial and warned the federal government against political manipulation. Stakeholders also called for sanctions against Justice Peter Lifu for flaunting his Superior Court order, as the ADC assures supporters they will remain on the ballot. Political parties and stakeholders affected by the Federal High Court controversial deregistration order welcomed the Court of Appeal decision to stay the execution of the judgment. The Court of Appeal in Abuja had on Tuesday ordered the stay of execution of the judgment that directed the Independent National Electoral Commission to deregister the ADC, Action People's Party, Action Alliance, Accord Party, and Zenith Labour Party, while delivering a stinging rebuke to Justice Lifu for flaunting a May 22nd appellate court order restraining him from delivering the ruling. In an anonymous decision on Tuesday, a three-member panel led by Justice A.B. Mohammed condemned Justice Lifu of the Federal High Court in Abuja for flaunting a May 22nd order that directed him to suspend proceedings before him, describing his conduct as the gravest form of judicial misconduct. The appellate court went further, invoking a Supreme Court precedent to characterize Justice Lifu's conduct in the harshest terms. From what he did, please visit the Punch newspaper. Mark slams federal government after a court reverses ADC deregistration. Moving to an interesting story from the Nation, a newspaper is where state in Nigeria a kick as Senate moves to amend the Electricity Act. A fresh battle over the control of Nigeria's electricity sector is brewing as state electricity regulators have accused the National Assembly of attempting to claw back powers already devolved to states under the Constitution and the Electricity Act 2023. In a strongly worded memorandum submitted to the Senate Committee on Power and obtained by the newsmen, Electricity Regulatory Commissions and Bureau from 16 states warned that the proposed Electricity Act Amendment Bill 2026 could reverse one of the most significant reforms in Nigeria's power sector. The regulators argue that the amendment bill, rather than strengthening the electricity market, seeks to restore extensive federal oversight over matters they insist have constitutional become the responsibility of state. The concerns were contained in a letter dated May 26, 2026, addressed to the chairman of the Senate Committee on Power and signed on behalf of the state electricity regulatory commissions and bureaus. Signatories to the document included the chairman of the Chief Executive of Electricity Regulators in Abia, Anambra, Bayelsa, Edo, Ekiti, Enugu, Gombe State, Imo, Kogi, Lagos, Nasarawa, Niger, Ogun, Ondo, Oyo, and Plateau State. The regulators said they had taken advantage of the Electricity Act 2023 to begin building subnational electricity market and had already engaged investors based on the framework created by the law. They noted that they had earlier met with the Senate committee and were subsequently requested to consolidate their concerns into a single memorandum for the consideration of lawmakers, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, and other stakeholders. This news was sourced from the Nation newspaper. For more details, please visit the Nation newspaper. State kicks as the Senate moves to amend Electricity Act. Moving forward to another story from the Vanguard newspaper. Abia begins relocation of transport operators to new terminal. The Abia state government has commenced the enforcement of its new centralized transport system in Omoha, with the phased relocation of transport operators to the Inene Oti bus terminal, Omoha. The Commissioner for Information, Oke Kano, made this known at Government House, Omoha, on Tuesday while briefing newsmen on the outcome of this week's State Executive Council ESCO meeting presided over by Governor Alex Oti. The Commissioner disclosed that in order to ensure compliance by transport operators, the state government took time to hold a series of meetings with transport stakeholders during which their concerns were addressed. Kanu added that, following the steps taken by the government, full operations had commenced at the terminal with informal transport operators and unions already moved to the facility despite the normal resistance that complaints change. If I said, he revealed that transport unions and operators were told to bring forward their workers each to the terminal, where they would be properly identified with reflective tags and carried along. This news was sourced from the Vanguard newspaper. Abia begins relocation of transport operators to new terminal. On to the last news on newspaper review this morning. Labour to engage federal government on minimum wage review. The Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress said they will restart negotiations with the federal government over a new national minimum wage, one that workers can no longer cope with rising living costs as inflation continues to erode real incomes. The unions are pushing for what they described as a genuine living wage to replace the current framework, which they said no longer reflects Nigerians' economic realities, particularly sharp increases in food, transport, housing, and healthcare costs. The position was contained in a joint address delivered at the 114th International Labour Conference in Geneva on Monday, where the unions also rejected any proposal to tax the minimum wage or impose additional fiscal burdens on low-income earners. Nigeria's current minimum wage of 70,000 was signed into law on July 18, 2024, an agreement between organized labor and the federal government. President Bola Tinubu formally announced the wage on 19th July 2024 and took effect on 29 July 2024. The agreement originally set a 3-year review cycle, shifting from the previous 5-year arrangement. However, in January 2025, the federal government adjusted the framework, announcing that the minimum wage would now be reviewed every 2 years, effectively setting 2026 as the next review point. This news was sourced from the Punch newspaper. For more details, please visit the Punch. Labour to engage federal government on minimum wage review. To bring newspaper review to a close this morning, here is a recap of major story read. Labour to engage federal government on minimum wage review. Mark slams federal governments after a court reverses ADC registration. State kick as Senate moves to amend Electricity Act. Habia begins relocation of transport operators to new terminal. And with that, we've come to the end of newspaper review. Thank you very much for listening. You can download Carnival Media app from Google Play Store and Apple iOS. You can also check out our website at www.carnivalmedia.ng. My name remains Joseph Oyekola. Good morning, and please do well to enjoy the rest of your day.